We're following breaking news in Maryland. Governor Wes Moore speaking about that deadly bridge collapse. Let's listen in.
All of our emergency personnel who have been working around the clock in advance of everything today and take care and leading on our response. And I want to thank everyone who has been part of the response, from the private sector to the public sector, to the armed forces, to philanthropy, to all parts of society, and all of those who have offered prayers from all over the world. I want to let you know that your prayers have been felt. All who have offered kind words, I want to say that your kind words have been heard. And also, I want to thank Trade Point Atlantic. This horrific human tragedy was also an economic catastrophe. In the early hours, it was Trade Point who said, "Let us help." The Port of Baltimore is one of the busiest ports in the world, and the collapse of the Key Bridge has shut down vessel traffic to the port. Trade Point Atlantic immediately began mobilizing and accepting some cargo ships from vessels that were bound from the Port of Baltimore, immediately began preparing for those arrivals, and they accepted their first shipment of cargo bound for the port just yesterday. We will continue working closely with their team, and we are grateful for their support and grateful for their leadership. Now, today, I will provide updates on the 4 directives I've issued to our team. As a reminder, the directives are: first, we need to continue to focus on recovery because we have to bring a sense of closure to these families. Second, we need to clear the channel and open the vessel traffic to the port because the health of the Maryland economy and the national economy depend on it. Third, we need to take care of all the people who have been affected by this crisis. That means the families, that means the workers, that means the businesses, that means the first responders, that means everybody. And fourth, we need to and we will rebuild the Key Bridge. So first, on our recovery efforts. As I mentioned yesterday, we need to do more work clearing the channel to move forward. This is a remarkably complex operation, and our focus needs to be on unity of command and unity of effort. Every morning, we have a unified command briefing, which includes state police, the U.S. Coast Guard, the Army Corps of Engineers, our federal delegation, and other leaders who are central to this mission. Now, during that briefing, Colonel Butler, the superintendent of the Maryland State Police, discussed that the conditions in the water makes it unsafe for divers. But as soon as those conditions change, his divers will go back in the water. Second, on clearing the federal channel and opening vessel traffic to the port. As of this morning, I've been briefed by the Maryland Department of Transportation on clearing wreckage and moving forward. Our team went out with the Coast Guard just a few hours ago, including the Coast Guard Commandant, to survey the damage, to see the wreckage up close, to see a freight that is nearly the size of the Eiffel Tower, and to see that same freight with the Key Bridge resting on top of it, to see shipping containers that were ripped in half as if they were paper mache, to know that out there you have to navigate high winds and electric wires. To go out there and to see it up close, you realize just how daunting a task this is. You realize how difficult the work is ahead of us. With a salvage operation this complex, and frankly, with a salvage operation this unprecedented, you need to plan for every single moment, and every time you take action to move a piece of wreckage, you understand that that requires you to reassess the situation. So when I led soldiers in combat, I knew that preparation was everything. You do not go into the field of battle without getting the intelligence that you need first. So as the mission continues, You need to stay frosty, you need to reassess, and you need to adapt. That's the mindset the Army Corps is applying with their partners in Unified Command. We have the best inspectors, the best surveyors, and the best engineers in the world working and setting up and executing a plan of action right here in Maryland. And I've been informed by the U.S. Navy that they are supplying us with 4 heavy lift cranes. 2 have already arrived, 1 arrives tonight, and the 4th is arriving on Monday. One of the cranes is called the Chesapeake 1000, and it can lift about 1,000 tons. But the big part, and one of the challenges, is that the key bridge, which sits on top of the vessel right now, that weight is somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 tons. So our team needs to cut that truss into sections in a safe, in a responsible, and in an efficient way before it can lift those pieces out of the water. This crane that we're looking at is massive. The thing we also know is this: so is the challenge ahead of us. So in the coming weeks, we expect to have the following entities inside of the water: 7 floating cranes, 10 tugs, 9 barges, 8 salvage vessels, and 5 Coast Guard boats. I've said it before, I will say it again, and I will keep on saying it. This is not just about Maryland. This mission is not just about Maryland. And what we're talking about today is not just about Maryland's economy. This is about the nation's economy. The port handles more cars and more farm equipment than any other port in this country. At least 8,000 workers on the docks have jobs that have been directly impacted by this collapse. Our economy depends on the Port of Baltimore, and the Port of Baltimore depends on vessel traffic. Maryland's economy and Maryland's workers rely on us to move quickly. But that's not just Maryland. The nation's economy and the nation's workers are requiring us to move quickly. Third, on taking care of our people. I want to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing with the Maryland legislature. I want to thank Speaker Adrian Jones, Senate President Bill Ferguson, and Minority Leader Steve Hershey. They have been in touch with our team since day one. I also want to thank Delegate Luke Clippinger, Senator Johnny Ray Saling, and other members of the District 6 and District 46 teams. And I want to thank all of the Maryland legislators who have reached out and offered their support. Legislators, frankly, on both sides of the aisle. And I want to thank our federal delegation, too, to include Jamie Raskin, who was here earlier, but unfortunately cannot be here now. But to the members of the Maryland General Assembly, we know this: we are 10 days away from the conclusion of this legislative session, and there is a lot of work to do. The top priority in that work is going to be finalizing our budget. My administration proposed a responsible budget that makes important investments in housing and childcare and environmental protection and transportation. So now it is vital that the House and the Senate find compromise as soon as possible, pass the budget, and provide certainty at this challenging and uncertain time. We also need to ensure that we pass legislation to support the families and the victims of the bridge collapse and everyone else who has been affected by this emergency. I'll be proposing the creation of a permanent state scholarship for the children of surviving spouses of transportation workers who lost their lives on this job. We will continue to push for legislation that seeks to protect workers like the 6 victims of the Key Bridge collapse. I've also asked the General Assembly to ensure that any legislation we work on provides the flexibility our administration needs to support port workers, businesses, and our transportation network. We cannot possibly find every answer to every problem in the next few days before session ends, but we can give the state the ability to respond over the coming months. Fourth, on rebuilding. As I said yesterday, we cannot rebuild the bridge until we have cleared the wreckage. I've always believed that you never learn anything about anybody when times are easy. If you really want to understand someone's mettle, watch them when it's hard. Watch them when it's difficult. Watch them when the stakes are high. Well, that time is now, and we are going to rise to meet this moment. Because we are Maryland tough, and because we are Baltimore strong. So, in this moment, I'm going to hand it off to the U.S. Coast Guard, over to Admiral Gilreath. And then after that, we'll be briefed by Colonel Pinchason from the Army Corps of Engineers, the Maryland State Police, the Maryland Department of Transportation, EPA Administrator Ortiz, Congressman Kwesi Nfume, and County Executive Johnny Olszewski. Admiral Gilreath.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. I'm Rear Admiral Shannon Gilreath, speaking on behalf of the Unified Command. As I mentioned last night, our number one priority of the Unified Command is to reopen the Port of Baltimore. And to do that, we've broken that into 3 phases. The number 1 phase is reopen the shipping channel. Number 2 is remove the ship. And number 3 is to remove the debris from the bridge from the rest of the waterway. We're beginning to make progress on those phases. In the phase 1, we talked about that we need to do the assessments of the bridge, both above the water line and beneath the water. Those assessments continue. As the governor said, we were out there today and we could see the engineers and the divers and the survey boats out there on the water in these difficult wind conditions, doing their job, doing their work to assess that bridge, to figure out how we can cut it up into the pieces we need to be able to lift. And back at the Unified Command, the governor, the commandant, all the elected officials, they could see those engineers working on those very plans. Engineers from the Army Corps of Engineers, Navy Supervisor of Salvage. We had state engineers there. There were some private engineers helping us, and we had some Coast Guard engineers there. And they're all working diligently to figure out that right plan to be able to break that bridge up into the right size pieces that we can lift. And the second part of that is we need to get the heavy lift equipment here. And we've been telling you that those cranes are on their way, and that equipment's on that way. And behind us, you can see the first of those things that are arriving. They're arriving, and they're going to continue to arrive for the next several days. And we're going to continue that planning so that we will be ready to be able to take advantage of that as soon as possible and do it safely. I'll turn it over to Colonel Pinchason.
Okay. Governor Moore, elected officials, thank you so much for having us here. As we just transition.
All right there. You've heard the top of this press conference updating the press and public. Maryland Governor Wes Moore talking about the priorities right now, the situation at the site of the Baltimore Bridge collapse. Wes Moore detailed the plan to get the debris out of the water, and also President Biden has just announced that he will visit Baltimore next week. Governor Moore today saying that the 4 priorities at this point: number 1, focus on the recovery for the sake of the families of the men lost in this tragedy, clear the channel and get the port opened, take care of every single person who is part of the first responder action and the enormous effort that is going to be needed to clear that channel, and with a 4th priority for the governor and for the city of Baltimore and the whole region to rebuild that bridge. He talked about all those things. Let's bring in ABC's Ike Ejiochi and ABC News transportation reporter Sam Sweeney. So, Ike, we heard it there from Governor Moore, the 4 priorities. And the last one, that rebuild the bridge, he didn't put any timeline on. It's impossible. But he did suggest, as did Admiral Gilroy, that the task of clearing the debris there has already begun.
That's right, Terry. You know, Governor Moore, he essentially fell back on his military training and ideals in order to create this 4-point plan, a plan he feels will be significant enough and foolproof enough to really get this entire port clear and back open to business. And he laid out that plan, and he essentially said the most important part right now is clearing the waterway. Clearing the waterway right now, that you can see, is still littered with all of that debris and concrete that we're seeing that's been there since earlier this week. Now, he said that the conditions in the water make it unsafe for divers. And he says as soon as those conditions change, the divers will continue to go back into the water and continue that assessment of the ship. Now, he said clearing the wreckage, the survey damage this morning. He was out in the water along with other first responders and the team. And he said that just the sheer scale of this is unprecedented. And he essentially said the U.S. Navy is supplying Maryland with 4 heavy lift cranes. 2 are here, that massive Chesapeake that can essentially lift up to 2.2 million pounds at a time. And he says another one will be coming tonight and hopefully one more over the weekend. But there's another thing that is coming. It's not just those heavy lift cranes that'll be helping this entire effort. He said there'll be 7, obviously altogether 7 floating cranes, 10 tugboats, 9 barges, 8 salvage vessels, and even 5 Coast Guard boats. This is a whole, all effort and all department effort here to essentially try to get this area back together. But another thing that I want to point out that he said is that taking care of our people. He said, yes, we need to clear this waterway. We need to get the ship out of here, but we can't forget about the people, especially the workers who not only save lives, but continue on a daily basis to be the backbone of this community. He said he finalized a budget that prioritized childcare, environmental protection, and of course, infrastructure. And he's urged his Congress to essentially pass that legislation. And one more thing that he's doing is that he said he's going to set up a permanent scholarship for the children of the transportation workers who lost their lives here, something that he says is necessary to bring this community back to whole, Terry.
It is an ambitious agenda, and it has to be given the scale of this catastrophe. And Sam, I want to ask you about something that Governor Moore said. He said that this is going to be an incredibly complex and difficult job because, as he says, every time the one piece of debris is removed from that tangled mess on top of the dolly, the cargo ship, and beyond, you have to stop and reassess the risk of moving forward. It is going to be painstaking as well as dangerous.
Yeah, Terry, if you think about it, you had these massive pieces of steel, and when you cut one, another piece moves. This is an unsecured structure at this point, and you are requiring divers to be there, other personnel. You have heavy lift cranes there. There are going to be tugs there. And then, of course, you still have the giant ship there, the cargo ship there. And they don't want any sort of dangerous obstacles in their way. And they have to do calculations for each and every part of this. It is going to be painstaking. It is going to be long. And not to mention, you have to have this specialized equipment. And as I just mentioned, they have a couple of cranes there already. More are coming tonight, another one hopefully early next week. This is going to be a very long and drawn-out process.
And yet there is some progress, obviously, being made on the big issue of getting the port operating again. At the top of his briefing, Governor Moore thanked Trade Point Atlantic. That is the facility associated with Amazon and FedEx, which have huge facilities there in the Port of Baltimore. That small shipyard is just south of the bridge, so it's open, and they are handling some traffic there. It does look like there is some progress being made. That news as well brought by Governor Wes Moore of Maryland. And Ike Ejiochi and Sam Sweeney, thank you both for being with us.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.